House Bill 5959 from Deputy Whip Ackerman is the first bill we're going to be taking up this evening. We have Deputy Whip Ackerman joined by our returning champion, Secretary of State Greg Amore. Deputy Whip, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Chairman, and good evening, colleagues. House Bill 5959 is a bill designed to prepare students on the cusp of high school graduation for a life of active and constructive civic participation. The bill will enable cities and towns to permit 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in school committee elections only. I was first interested in this bill because for years I've had a youth advisory commission composed of civically minded Lincoln and high school students. These students provide me with unique youth-centered perspective on the issues we discuss here and give students reasons to stay engaged in local political life. While my youth commissioners represent the most likely civic participants, not all students are or have the opportunity to be highly engaged in civic life. When students turn 18 and they go off to college, they often leave their hometown communities for the first time, just as they are finally becoming eligible to vote. With the difficulties and logistics of transitioning to adult life, there is a disconnect with getting newly eligible voters to turn out. For that reason, sadly, young people are less likely to vote in this age group. House Bill 5959 provides part of a solution to inspire young civic engagement. There is a body of research demonstrating that voting is a habit. If someone votes for the first time, they are significantly more likely to vote in elections thereafter. This bill can help bridge the disconnect and inspire a civic habit in soon-to-be graduating students by providing a narrow, well-tailored opportunity to cast a ballot. While in school, students have access to teachers, mentors, and parents who can encourage the student to make an informed choice. In addition, students bring a trove of knowledge about the day-to-day life in the school system that would be indispensable for school committee members to consider, much like my youth commissioners provide a critical perspective for me. This bill is enabling, and there are other places like Maryland and Boston City Council just recently passed this as well. And I would like to give a little shout out to the Young Dems of Rhode Island for their assistance and their advocacy on this issue. Thank you.
Any questions for Deputy Whip Ackerman? Yes, Representative McGaugh.
Thank you, Whip Ackerman, and I applaud your encouraging young voters to get active in the process. It's really wondering about a procedural process and if there's been any discussion about this and what this would mean, say, to the Secretary of State's office. Would it be required to print a separate ballot?
Right, so he's here, and he probably can address that exact issue for you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Secretary?
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, committee members. Yes, we would have to produce a separate ballot because our election cycle is consistently on the even number of years. So the simple answer is yes, and that is the case where this does exist already. Okay.
Representative Agello?
Wouldn't you have to produce a separate ballot anyhow so that the 16-year-olds would only be voting for the school committee candidates?
Correct, but you wouldn't have an entire ballot if the municipal elections were separate. Correct.
Any further questions from the committee? Mr. Secretary, do you have anything to add?
I do. I want to support Representative Ackerman's bill because, as she said, we know that if young people are engaged early, they'll remain engaged. It is said that the states were the incubator for democracy. I would say the localities are the test tube for that incubator, and we look throughout American history. Women and people of color voted before they were granted the federal right to vote in states who took advantage of the possibility of changing those election laws. And I think this is a perfect way to implement Representative Newberry's Civic Literacy Act, where students can get engaged and then act on that engagement in their local elections.
Thank you very much. Representative Newberry, you've been tagged in.
Yeah, no, for the record, I don't agree with that last statement.
I'm aware. Thank you, Representative.
Any further questions or comments? All right, seeing none, we do have some witnesses signed up. We have Anthony Cherry and John Marion. So if you are both here and would like to come up. Oh, no, John, you're not speaking. Oh, it's a first for everything. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Anthony Cherry. I'm a board member of the Young Democrats here. I just want to thank the Deputy Whip for her championing of this legislation. 5959 is simply about civic engagement. We want to encourage the youth of Rhode Island to participate in our voting process. We often hear during elections why my vote does not matter, I'm just one of many. This has direct impact. The 16 and 17-year-olds will have a direct impact on their curriculum going forward. They would have the ability to choose their or help choose their school committee members. And I think that's a powerful thing to show them and get them invested in the voting process. As the Deputy Whip and the Secretary have both mentioned, it's about creating habits, and good habits going forward will only increase civic engagement for the future. And that's what we're trying to achieve. We want to be achieving 75% of voter engagement for the next 20 years. This is about the long-term investments into our voting processes. We want to be the state that's encouraging enfranchisement, not limiting it like other states. So thank you, the Deputy Whip, and I'll take any questions.
Representative Corvesi.
I have a question of the sponsor, if she wouldn't mind, very quickly. I'm just curious, or the Secretary of State, if they know. Did any of the unions weigh in on this bill?
Not that,
Curious
no,
if any of the
no.
teachers' unions weighed in
Nobody,
on
no.
this.
No.
Thank you.
Representative Newberry.
Why limit it to the school committee? Why not just lower the voting age to 16?
Well, I think this is a good opportunity, as the Secretary has mentioned. We are an incubator of sorts, and I think that we're starting small. We don't want to go too big here. We want to start small and see if there is an appetite for this. And I think there's a perfect way. It's a perfect correlation of sorts between voting in a school committee, because they have that direct impact. I think there's a learning curve that has to happen, and being able to participate in a school vote. Again, I keep saying that it's about participating in your school elections and having direct impact.
Well, I mean, it seems to me at the town council, at least in smaller towns, I don't know about the city, it might be different, it has more of an impact at the end of the day because they control the budget. So why not town councils?
Again, I think it's just about school committee first. I think we just want to start with school committee, and because it's been implemented in other cities and towns across the country. So I think it's just about starting there.
But your goal is to try to get the overall voting age lower to 16 if this were implemented and successful. That's what you're aiming at, right?
That's a little farther than I think we've thought. We just want to focus on the school committee this one time.
Why, what age can people legally buy cigarettes?
18.
And why is that?
It's based upon empirical data, and so the empirical data shows that if you vote, or if you have the ability to vote early and instill those habits, you'll be able to vote longer. I think that you'll find many students that have the cognizant recognition, understanding of our government to be able to vote. So I think to your point on cigarettes, I think that science would say that our brains are developing, and we don't want to harm our developing brains farther than to introducing cigarettes or alcohol for that matter.
That's my next question. What about alcohol? So same answer?
21.
What about purchasing firearms?
18 to 21.
Why is that?
It's state law.
No, but why?
Empirical evidence. So again, going back to empirical evidence, there's been studies that shown that kids and 16 and 17-year-olds are able to understand their weight and power, their power in voting. So based upon the evidence and the empirical evidence of such, they should be given the opportunity to participate in the process.
What about joining the military?
18.
18, why is that?
Empirical evidence.
What evidence?
I don't have that in front of you. I can certainly provide that to you, Rep.
I did hear you say that there's empirical evidence that people's brains are still developing at age 16 and 17. So what is it that makes you think people have the judgment to cast votes on millions or potentially really millions and millions of dollars of taxpayer dollars and many, many other issues if you take this further versus smoking cigarettes or
Well, I think that
gun or
you're also
alcohol or
talking
anything else?
about understanding and also a developing of opinions. And I think we all develop opinions through our entire lives. I'm sure that you didn't have the same opinions 20 years ago, and I didn't have the same opinions 20 years ago, too. So I think we always develop in our opinions of what's going forward. So I think that's a little bit different to compare cigarettes and alcohol and military to voting.
Why?
Well, for one, it's about ingesting and altering the body is one of them for alcohol and cigarettes, and we're talking about being able to participate in our voting elections.
Isn't it about exercising judgment? I mean, don't we want to set an age at which we trust people to exercise independent judgment? Whatever that age might be, why should that age be different for voting from drinking alcohol?
It's already different.
Well, no, it's not. Well,
it is different. It's
yeah.
21
Actually,
or
I think
18, so we want
I think alcohol should be 18.
Do we want?
Yeah.
Okay,
Personally,
so
I think
we
it
have
should
that.
be 18
we
for
can
everything,
have-
personally, but yeah.
I think we're going a little off topic here, but yeah, and if we want to talk about the difference between 18 and 21, we can in that. So
Okay. Just, you don't really, I understand, it's fine. I'm not going to belabor the point.
no, of course.
Yes, Representative Breen.
Thank you. I guess a quick question is, we've heard a bill in this committee, and it is a bill which would carve out the ability for undocumented individuals to vote in municipal elections. Has your organization taken a position on that legislation?
No, we have not. It's a board vote, and we have board votes that we wanted to adjust this bill.
Is that something that your organization would take a position on?
We can bring that up in our next board meeting, but at this point in time, no one has brought that up for a discussion.
Because what concerns me is that that's a carve-out. And so you're saying, okay, so undocumented individuals can vote in municipal elections, and now we're saying 16-year-olds can vote in school committee elections. And if the concern that the committee had in the same vein of that other bill was, I think that will lead eventually, and I think it's almost, I can't see how it doesn't happen, that it will lead to mission creep, that, well, if you can vote in municipal elections, why can't you, and just keep it going. What is to say that this isn't just the beginning of movement, just to say 16-year-olds can vote? And why should 16-year-olds, and really the reality is, why should 16-year-olds be voting? I mean, I grew up in a family in which, my father was a state representative here for 14 years. I was a house page when I was a junior in high school. I couldn't vote. I couldn't, because I wasn't allowed to. And that was the expectation. Then you have to wait till you're 18 to vote.
Well, would you like the opportunity to vote if you were there, if you were allowed to?
No, because at my age, when I was in high school, voting for class president was my ability to vote. That was what the rights that I had then. Inside my school. I think that the question here is, and I agree with Representative Newberry, why should 16-year-olds be voting for people who are going to ultimately hold the purse strings for the taxpayers of that particular city or town, when the people that we're allowing to vote really have no skin in the game whatsoever when it comes to paying taxes or paying...
I think they do have the skin in the game. Sorry, and I do apologize for interrupting you, Rep. I do think they have the most skin in the game because they're the ones learning. And I think they're the ones that are being implemented the agenda and the curriculum that is set forth by the school committee and by the superintendent. So I think they have the most skin in the game. And I think that is the most important thing. We talk about this institution a lot, about protecting our kids, and we want to be able to trust the kids at a certain point in time.
Well, as parents, isn't it our job to protect our kids, to guide our kids? As adults, isn't it our job to guide our kids, to know as the adults in the room that this is either A, the best curriculum, or B, the best use of our taxpayer funds? I mean, I don't, what qualifies a 16-year-old to be able to make that kind of a judgment based on being 16? I know when I was 16, I didn't understand A Midsummer's Night Dream at all. I didn't understand why we were reading it, but I knew we had to because you got graded on it. But my teacher, Bob Gerton, knew that there was a reason, and that reason played out years later. What makes the Young Democrats think that 16-year-olds can effectively vote in a way that will positively affect and impact taxpayers and a curriculum and the teachers and all the parents. Like, I guess that's my question. And so it's a lot to unpack right there, I know. But
No.
those are my thoughts. Thank you, Chairman.
Of course. I think I said sum up briefly with a personal experience. When I was in 8th grade, again, this is when I was like, 13, I think, so it's a little bit different than 16, but along the same lines of civil engagement, we were basically on work to rule, and we didn't have any extracurricular activities. And so we forced our vote, we forced our voices. The only way we could is by approaching the school committee. And this gives the students another avenue to voice their opinions and voice their objections or their approval of what the curriculum may or may not exist. And it's never not perfect. I mean, I should say it's always imperfect, and that's democracy at its finest. And so I think this is a trial. I would love to have Rhode Island be that incubator of sorts and have this. So.
Representative Newberry.
Yes, you said a moment ago that you thought that the students have the most skin in the game. And I have to ask you a question about what makes you think students have more skin in the game than the parents of those students or any member of let's call it a town, a district, okay? Mm-hmm. And I bring that up because we're always hearing pushback from people about school funding who don't have kids in the system. Why should I be paying for other people's kids? The whole purpose of public education is to benefit society as a whole. It's not to benefit the student. I've had 3 kids go through public school. These one's left a senior. My interests in the public school system in my town are no more, no less when he graduates than they were before. So I totally disagree with your statement that the students have the most skin in the game. Unless you have an explanation for that, I'd appreciate it.
It's in my opinion that the students have the most skin in the game. I should phrase it like that. In my opinion, the students have as much, if not more, than for our public system, because like you said, it's about the greater good of society. And I think that we want to teach our kids that that we want to give them the opportunity to do so. And I think that they have to live with the direct implications of any school committee vote.
So do the parents. So do the
Parents,
other
yes, correct.
taxpayers.
I'm not trying to diminish their role in this either.
Representative McGaugh.
I just want to counter. I know you've been asking a lot of questions, so I want to thank you for the work that you do. I will say that I have met some very actively engaged young voters, including someone who I worked with very closely in Little Compton, who headed up the high school Democrats and started high school Democrat associations in high schools across the state. And I know of several other high school students who are very actively engaged. And so I think that we need to foster that and we need to encourage that. And, thinking about 16, and, I know you talked about cigarettes, for example, but we also let 16-year-olds get behind a car. Right. That requires a great deal of judgment to get behind what could potentially be a dangerous vehicle. But we recognize that 16-year-olds have the capacity to manage something like that. But anyway, I just want to applaud you and say that I have known many high school students who are very actively engaged in the process, and I think would really benefit from having more of a say in the process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments from members of the committee? Thank you very much for your testimony. We have one more witness signed up, Pat Ford. Welcome, Pat.
Hi. I hadn't planned to come testify on this, but just 2 very brief points. Number 1, anytime a political operative, albeit a well-intentioned and honest one, defines a bill like this for voting, it raises the hair on the back of my neck. Is there a microphone on? Oh, sorry. How's that? So anyway, as I was mentioning, anytime a political operative raises a legislation regarding voting, I get worried. Even a very well-intentioned and a very honest one at that. I'm aware of his work and he's very professional. But let's be really honest on 2 levels. Number 1, school boards are the new political battleground in this state. And there's been a reemergence of the political right and the conservatives in getting engaged in schools. After years of school boards complaining about the lack of parental involvement, Well, all of a sudden they are. I would posit, if I were a cynic, that this would be a way to fight against some of the gains made by politicals of the center and the right in regaining and recapturing school boards, which, if you were of a political persuasion or if you were a conservative, you would argue are wildly out of control and largely not doing very well in this state. The second point is a little more important to me personally. And first of all, I want to acknowledge that we've had some very brief conversations, very fruitful conversations with the Secretary of State's office about the issue I'm about to broach. The state of Rhode Island continues aggressively to work towards increasing the ability and the ease and the accuracy of people in their right to vote, which of course I applaud. We all want everyone to vote. It's critical. But at the same time, the state of Rhode Island is one of the most difficult states in the nation for ballot access. Now, what does that mean? Why are the two connected? Well, unless you're a Republican or a Democrat in this state, you don't have voter lists. You don't have subsidized primaries. You don't have folks showing up like this early on to worry about professionally special elections. You don't have any of that. If you're a grassroots political organization, you are on your own. And my generation greatly values, if you will, the quote-unquote legitimacy that being a registered party attaches to an organization, when in fact there is no real difference. I'll use the Libertarians and the Working Families as an example. Rhode Island requires 5% either of the gubernatorial vote or the presidential vote in order to get ballot status. Other than that, you are on your own, and you get none of the benefits and ease, if you will, of being able to petition to put your candidates. In the Libertarian case, they actually put a candidate on for governor. 3 separate Board of Elections meetings in order to finally authorize the petitions that had already been submitted. It's a rigged game. So why does it affect this conversation? The state works aggressively to support people so that they have an opportunity to vote largely in Democratic or perhaps occasional Republican functions. If you can vote, but your vote is limited in what your choices are, that is voter suppression. And that's what's occurring here in Rhode Island. Again, one of the most difficult states in the nation. And I see none of this energy outside of the Secretary of State's office. I see none of the energy in working to expand the choice that people can vote for. And I used the Green Party, the Working Families Party, and the Libertarian Party as examples. So across the political grassroots spectrum, the game is rigged here in this state. So I would just implore you to because we've spent the last 2 or 3 years making sure that Democrats and occasional Republicans can vote. I would implore you as an organization to work, if possible, almost as aggressively to make sure that grassroots political organizations in the state have a lawful and reasonable way to play, if you will, to be at the same table as the establishment Democratic and Republican parties, which we refer to as the duopoly. Thank you.
Pat,
Oh, sorry. Questions?
I think respectfully, I realize what you discussed went a little bit far afield as to the substance of the bill before us, but to answer your desire for a more expansive playing field, the bill that I put in regarding open primaries would do exactly what you said.
Oh, I absolutely, and I respect. Again, there's a lot of great individual efforts here in the Rhode Island government. But again, the connection to me is, if in fact you don't have a choice right now, and I'll take for example the presidential election, if in fact you don't have a choice of who to vote for, and that's limited, the connection is we work hard to make sure that people can vote for Republicans and Democrats. We don't work so hard to make sure that if you're not fitting narrowly into those two niches, and in fact, the voter base is growing exponentially away from those two parties. But if you continue to place obstacles in the way to gain the quote-unquote legitimacy they need to compete, that's voter suppression. But again, I respect Representative Cravesi. I respect your efforts and continue your efforts at voter reform. Thank you. Anyone else?
Any other questions for Pat? Seeing none, thank you.